So, welcome to part one of Money by Design presented by Praise Covenant. We're going to cover some financial basics. There is quite a bit of information out there surrounding money. There are tons of opinions, all kinds of perspective. So, today we're going to try our best to keep it simple, make sure that we are only giving facts, and of course, let you all come to your own conclusions on what works best for you. So, starting out, like I said, there are many sources for information, especially when it comes to finances these days. You have all kind of people that say they are experts, whether it's about saving, debt consolidation, debt erasure, it could be credit, investing, real estate, stock market, whatever it is. There are all kinds of people that give varied opinions about how you should handle your own money. So the plan for this was to put a couple classes together to give people the factual financial basis on what that looks like for you, whether you're an individual, whether you have a family, regardless of what your situation is. These topics and foundational principles can be applied by anyone and everyone. So, this first class, we're going to get into some basics regarding finances in general, so household finances. We'll also get into some credit basics, how to best use it to your advantage, and then we'll also cover some investing basics. Class number two will have more in the way of investing, so we'll dive a little bit deeper there, and that'll give you a clearer picture of what to do with your money. If you've already paid debt, you saved, and now you're in a position where you'd like to invest. We'll cover some simple ways that you can make sure you've at least started your investing journey. You're setting that foundation for yourself, or again, if you have a family and children, we'll get into that. So our first slide is regarding credit. I know there's a lot around credit, depending on what your parents did or did not teach you. You either may have learned nothing about credit until adulthood, and it kind of smacked you with reality, and you had to learn by yourself. You could have learned, like I did, that credit was always a bad thing, and you didn't want anything to do with it. Avoid credit cards, avoid lines of credit, and essentially avoid debt as a whole. And then there are others who were more fortunate than some of us, and they learned how to use credit and how to use debt to better themselves and their financial positioning in life. So we're going to begin with some of the basics on what that looks like starting out. Of course, there are some really advanced credit strategies, some really advanced debt strategies, but we're not going to get into that today. Feel free to ask questions at the end. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. I'll have a whole Q&A portion at the end of the class. Um, so you are more than welcome to ask your questions in. If you come up with anything as we're going, if you wouldn't mind holding it to the end, that way we can do all of it at the same time. That would be much appreciated. So again, we're going to begin the class getting into what credit looks like. So firstly, I want to talk about a really important foundational piece. What makes up your credit score? So again, this is another topic where there are a lot of things out there that may tell you certain things to focus on, but what you're seeing on the screen, the chart and the breakdown of percentage, this is what all the credit bureaus use to determine what your credit score is. And then I'll get into what each of them mean as well. So the biggest thing that affects your credit score is payment history. And of course, that seems like common sense. You know, if you make your payments, you're good. If you don't make your payments, it's bad. So that's pretty black and white. That's a relatively easy one to get under your belt. Secondly is 30% of your score is determined by your credit utilization. And we're going to get into that in the next couple slides, exactly what that is and how to utilize that. Um, that's a really big one. There are a lot of misconceptions about credit utilization, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that one because it's something that is extremely beneficial, and it's an easy way increase your score just by adjusting your utilization. So we'll get into that over the next couple slides. Thirdly is at 15% length of history. So this portion means if you had a credit card for 6 months, but you have another credit card that you've had for 10 years, the one that you've had for 10 years will have a much larger impact on your credit score positively because you've held that credit line for that length of time. And the reason the credit bureaus look at length of history for each of your lines of credit, whether it be a credit card or a HELOC, whatever that may look like, is because they want to see that you having a history with one company, so a credit card company, for example, you having a history with them shows that you make responsible choices with your finances, which of course that's what a credit score is designed to show or not show, whether you make good or bad decisions. Um, so that's a really important one, and we'll get into that in a couple slides as well. Talk about some more specifics there. Uh, the fourth one on the list at 10% is new credit inquiry. So if you go into, let's say, a car dealership, that's probably the most common, um, and they're going to run you for a loan, and they say, "Hey, we're going to run your credit." That's usually when you'll hear people say, "Is it a soft or a hard credit pull?" Most oftentimes, it's a soft credit pull, but that still does have a slight effect on your credit. The hard credit pulls have a pretty significantly larger ding on your credit score because the credit bureaus don't like seeing lots of credit inquiries because for them it shows, in essence, it shows a sign of desperation because you're just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. So you'll hear some people say, just a quick tip on that, if you are going to get a car, um, then they'll say if you're going to three different dealerships, go to all three and have all three run your credit in the same day, because for the bureaus, that'll count as one inquiry. So there are little things like that that you can do if you do need to do something of the sort, or if you're going to, let's say, your son, daughter, nephew, niece just turned 18 and they want to start applying for credit cards. Um, the best way to do it is to make all the applications in the same day because, again, uh, the credit bureaus will consider that one credit pull and it'll have less of an impact on your credit. So, a quick tip on how to kind of finagle a better score out of those processes. And then lastly is credit mix. This one is the least of the five, as you can see. So it's not extremely important, but what this one is, so let's say you have 10 credit cards and you go to apply for a home loan or a mortgage. There is a very good chance that you will not be approved because in their eyes, the only debt that you've ever had to be responsible for are small lines of credit that are revolving. So if you use $100, that's all you have to pay. So in their eyes, it doesn't show them that you've been entrusted with a large amount of debt that you had to repay. So in that instance, credit mix is important. Same goes for a car. If you're trying to buy a $70,000 car, but you only have two credit cards for $1,000 each, overwhelming chance they won't approve you because your credit mix would not be considered satisfactory. Um, Now, a really good way to have a credit mix is you can have 2 to 3 credit cards. 4 or 5 won't kill you either. You don't want to have too many though, because it looks a little suspicious in the eyes of the bureaus as well. You don't want to have too many lines of credit open. But let's say you have 3 credit cards, you have an auto loan, and then maybe if you don't have a mortgage, let's say maybe you have a personal line of credit or you get a personal loan from a credit union. That would be a satisfactory mix. And if you've had that for longer than a year, there will be most applications you get will be approved because they'll see that good mix. You have a mix of low revolving credit lines, medium static lines, and then another revolving line that's a little larger. So that is what credit mix is. I hadn't planned to just yet, but I realized this is quite a bit of information. So I want to pause really quickly and see if anybody has any questions before I dive a little deeper into the utilization portion for credit. And then again, after we cover this credit info, we're going to talk about some investing basics that'll set up our second class. So let me know if anybody has questions, feel free to ask. I know that was quite a bit of info. I don't want to drown or overwhelm. You can either just come off mute, raise your hand, whatever works. Don't be shy, I promise. I'll be nice.
I have a question. This is
Go for
Sam.
it.
Uh, when it comes to counseling, I mean, paying off your credit,
Hmm.
should you save before you start? Save a little before you start counseling off your debt, or should you tackle that first?
Yeah, so that there's not a universal answer for that. So I'll give you the two answers. Um, if you are, let's say, you're a single man or woman, and you're only responsible for yourself, a lot of people will take a more aggressive approach and will pay off debt before they build up their savings, because they don't want to increase the amount that they're going to be paying due to that interest rate. Because, of course, credit cards, especially nowadays, they're almost 30%, which is insane. So you're paying, let's just round it up to make it easy. You're paying 30% on whatever amount that you've charged on top of that just to pay that amount off. So the more aggressive concept is to pay the debt off before. Um, Whereas a safer approach is that you build up some version of savings before you start tackling the debt. And now what that looks like is, again, and this is completely dependent on your different situation. So if you are single by yourself, I would say the least that you should have saved would be $500. Um, the industry standard or the kind of acceptable standard is that you have 3 months worth of expenses saved up at a minimum. Now, for most people, that is quite a lot, especially in California. I mean, just base rent, that's you're looking at 6 grand just for rent, not including you having to save for car payment, insurance, all your monthly expenses, and that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit higher of a hill to climb. But that would be considered the really safe way to do it. Now, I've I have always, and this is just a personal approach, have always preferred a mix of it, because while I don't want to pay 25, 30% on interest for any debt that I have, I also don't want to ignore the need for savings, because when the economic climate gets as it is now and it's a little uneasy, a little bit rocky, tons of layoffs. There's a lot of change with AI, just blowing through industries, and people are losing their jobs to that, and having to redirect their careers. In my opinion, it does serve you well to still have a savings that you are building. Because if you think about it, you never know if a layoff is coming. You never know. You may get sick. You may injure yourself on the job, something like that, and you could be out 3 to 6 months. And of course, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that. And so, if you don't have a savings, that's when you wish you would have. So those are the three approaches. I said two at the beginning, but I gave a third as a mix. I suggest a mix, but again, it really is dependent upon what your monthly income is. If you have a good monthly income, a shared income, you can throw a little bit more at the debt to get that down, but also still save a reasonable amount every month to make sure you have a good nest egg.
All right.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah. And I got just one more, then I'm done.
Sure.
Um, you probably mentioned it and I missed it, but what is the reason for the dings on your credit? Like when they do credit check, like it hurts you, but
Yeah.
say they ding you and then you turn around, don't even get it, you know? Like,
Yeah, so I mentioned that really quickly. It was I didn't spend it was like half a sentence. So the reason for the dings whenever they do a hard or a soft credit pull is because they need to alert other creditors. So like let's say I'm at a bank and I apply for a loan and I get denied, or I apply for a loan and what they offer me, the credit, or excuse me, the interest rate is entirely too high, and so I don't accept it. So I'm shopping around and I go to another bank. The next day I hit another bank and I do that 4 or 5 times. The credit dings initial purpose is to alert other creditors that you're shopping for whatever credit you're trying to get. Because it could come up as a red flag if you keep getting bounced around and nobody's accepting your application and you're not getting credit anywhere. So for them, it serves as a little bit of a flag. Now, for the credit bureaus, it serves as a warning as well because it's like, all right, is this person extremely desperate? Are they about to start making bad financial decisions because they can't get money and they need X, Y, and Z? So it's more of like a red flag system. Is it fair? There's an argument that it only affects people in lower income brackets, and so it's disproportionate in its implementation, but it is what it is, and that was the original concept.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. And then Tajanique, you said, do flex spending apps such as Affirm affect your credit? If you had asked me that question a month ago, I would have told you no. But as of this month, yes. So Affirm, Klarna, Afterpay. I know I'm missing a couple. But anyway, all the ones of that sort, they are reporting whatever you've borrowed, essentially, because you are borrowing. Whatever you've borrowed on those payment plans will now reflect on your credit. Um, it quite literally just started within the last, I want to say, 20 or 30 days. So there's not really any information on how much it affects your credit. The the idea is that it won't affect your credit as much as a traditional credit card, but there's just no data yet because it hasn't been around long enough to even hit anybody's credit, or if it has, it just started within the last week or two. So, to answer your question, yes, they do, but to what extent, unfortunately, we don't know yet. It has not been in effect long enough for us to make that determination and see what it actually looks like in real life. Really great questions. Anybody else before I move on? Like I said, we're going to touch on credit utilization, which is the free way to have a positive effect on your credit. So that is a good amount of info. So I just wanted to pause really quickly. Okay, excellent. So let's move on. All right. So a couple common mistakes to avoid with credit, and I'm not going to spend too much time here because we've already gotten into part of it, and this is some of it is relatively easy to understand. So, uh, Ms. Fortney, I see your question. I'll get to that in just a moment, please. So, a few of the common mistakes to avoid. Um, Carrying a balance does not always hurt your score, only if the balance is too high. And that is one of the biggest points that I'm going to cover in our utilization section. So, all debt is not bad. I'm going to say that a few times throughout this presentation. I want to really drive that home. All debt is not bad. Too much debt is terrible, but not all debt is bad. Closing old accounts reduces available credit and increases utilization. So that goes back to what we just saw on that graph where a portion of the percentage of your credit score is determined by uh, how long you have had these lines of credit open. So that's a big deal. You definitely want to keep your oldest lines open. If you absolutely have to close a credit card, it is 9 out of 10 times best to close your newest line first and leave the oldest ones. Opening too many new cards results in multiple hard inquiries and shortens your average age. So that is what we just talked about in that last portion and in both sections, both the where it talks about shortening your average age, meaning the length of time you've had that credit line open. Because the credit bureau looks at two things. They look at whatever your oldest card is. So let's say that's 10 years. But then if you have 5 cards that you just opened in the last year, they also take an average of those ranges. So that will put your average range from your oldest, which is 10, it'll put it around 2 years, which is not a very long range. So you want to make sure that you're not opening too many new cards, and that's why I mentioned you want to stick around 3, maybe 4. but you don't want to go too crazy with the number of cards you get because it does impact your score. Um, and then lastly, this one, again, it probably seems like common sense, but I'll talk about why it impacts. Where paying only the minimum payment, it prolongs the debt and increases the interest amount that you're paying. Now, a few years ago, credit card companies got hit with a lawsuit, as they do every couple years for some kind of scam that they run or some kind of debt practice that does not benefit the consumer. And they got hit with the lawsuit, and they are now required to tell you how long you will be paying on your credit card if you only pay the minimum balance. So it'll either be on your statement. Some put it on the screen if you're paying online. It'll tell you if you make the minimum payment, this is how long you'll be paying, and it may even tell you this is how much you're going to pay in interest. Which, when you start seeing those numbers, you realize how bad of a decision it is to make that monthly minimum payment. You're paying at least triple what you charged. So if you charged $100, you're going to be paying at least 300 on that to pay it off. Um, and the longer it carries, of course, the more you pay. So definitely not good for the long term. Again, there are some months where things get really tight, stuff comes up, and you have to, and that's totally fine as long as you're making the payment. But if you do have some leeway, it is always best to put a little bit extra on your credit card payments. So next, we're going to move on to using credit cards the right way. Um, just a couple of basic concepts. I'm not going to go too far into the weeds with this section. But you want to treat your credit card like a debit card that comes with rewards. And what do I mean by that? There's the old saying, I'm not sure, some of you may have heard it, where it says, if you don't have your checking account, don't swipe your credit card. Um, because I don't know if any of you ever did it when you first started getting credit, but it is easy and tempting to swipe that card because you know that there's no immediate payment required. You already know that if you swipe that card for $500, you're only going to have to pay $50 the next month, and so it's enticing to do, um, but you do want to avoid doing that because it will have a negative effect on your score um, by keeping that revolving account open and running nonstop. Now, with what I said earlier, and I'm going to drill it home one more time, all debt is not bad. Um, so when I talked about using your credit card like a debit card that comes with rewards, um, now what does that mean? So that means if, like I said, you don't have the money in your checking or savings, you shouldn't be using the card for that amount. So just for an example, so we can kind of drive this home a little bit. If I have $500 in my checking account, it would not be a fiscally responsible decision for me to go make $1,000 purchase on my credit card because now I'm over leveraged, which means I have more debt than I have capital, capital being money. And so now I'm in a position where I am over leveraged and I could end up hurting my credit because I can put myself in a position where either I'm not allowed or not able to make the payment, or I've put myself in a position because of the debt amount that I keep having to make just the minimum payment because I can't afford anything extra. And then that impacts your credit as well. And we'll talk about how. So you do want to use your credit card every month. You want to use them every month. And I'll get into a little bit as of why, because one reason is when you're using your card regularly, that's what helps you build history. So using your credit card, it does two things. And I'll set this foundation here. There are two entities that you have to be thoughtful of when using your credit cards. One is the credit card company. So Capital One, Chase, Bank of America, Discover, all those companies, right? The second entity that you have to be aware of are the credit bureaus. So the credit card companies are the ones who give you the credit you're making payments to, and they report your credit usage and history to the credit bureaus. And that's where your score is determined. That's who communicates to all the creditors saying what your credit worthiness is. but they look for two separate things. So I want to get into that a little bit here. I'm not going to go all the way, but far enough to give you a good understanding. So a couple things that come from using your credit card every month. One, it shows the credit card company that you're using the products that they gave you. Because when you apply, they're giving you a product, which is the credit card. And so if you don't use the credit card, sometimes they'll just close it. Like I had a Wells Fargo credit card a bunch of years ago. I didn't use it for, I don't know, I want to say a year and a half, 2 years. And I just got a letter in the mail that says they closed my card due to lack of use, which I was pretty upset about because it affected my credit negatively um, by that account, that line of credit being closed. But in their mind, if they give you a product and you're not using it, then what's the point? So sometimes they will close it. And in environments like today where credit is a little bit tight, you're going to see that more often. So you want to maintain a positive relationship with the credit card company. Now, secondly, it shows the credit bureaus that you can have a certain amount of credit or a certain amount of debt extended to you, and you'll maintain that relationship in a positive way. And it shows the bureaus that you're not going to be irresponsible, that you won't over leverage yourself by taking on tons of debt that you can't really afford. It shows them that you are responsible in making your monthly payments. And now these may seem like common sense things, right? But people get tripped up because one month you pay a minimum payment, the next charge you, the next month you charge another $500 on top of the thousand you already put on there, and then it kind of turns into this catch-22 cycle that's really difficult to get out of because you're just burdening yourself with more and more debt. So that's why the suggested approach for a credit card is to use it like a debit card that gives you rewards on the side. Um, and the next slide for utilization is this is what I really want to get into. Um, so you'll see the chart here. It has some ranges on the graph on the left-hand side, so I'll get into that first. Um, it shows on the x-axis or the bottom line what the different score ranges are. So 300, 579, 580, so on and so forth. You can read those. Now, what this chart shows is the average utilization percentage by people within these credit ranges. And as you can see, people with bottom of the barrel 300 credit, they use their credit lines over 80%. That is terrible because it puts you in such a bad position and it makes it almost impossible for you to get out of that cycle of debt. And you'll notice, I won't go through the percentage for each one, but if you notice, the people at the top of the food chain with perfect 850 credit scores, their credit utilization is under 10%, which is incredible. Those are really, really, really great numbers. And that's what you want to aim for. Now, how you do that is what we'll talk about now. So before we get into the extreme specifics of that, if you see the text on the right hand side where it says aim for under 30% utilization, and then it says under 10% is ideal and associated with top credit scores, as you can see on the chart. Uh, Now, what does that mean though? So when it says aim for under 30% utilization, I'll give an example. So let's say that you have $100 credit card. I mean, you wouldn't have that. They wouldn't even give a card with that low of an amount. But just for ease of use and to make the numbers a little bit easier to follow, let's say $100. Um, so under 30% credit utilization means you would not go above $30 used and owed on that card. Now, there are a couple different ways to get around that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the ideal amount, the ideal percentage is to keep it under 10% utilization. So again, going back to the example of a $100 credit card, you would have a running balance of under $10 on that card. So of course, whatever your balances or your credit lines are, you would just adjust that for that same concept. Um, so the reason you want to keep it under 30%, it shows the credit card a couple things, and it shows the credit bureaus. some information about you and your spending habits. So what does that show? It shows the credit company that you do have a use for their product. So if you remember, we just talked about them closing credit lines because people just don't use them. And at that point, what's the point of leaving this product open and then they have to maintain your records and they have to send out statements and all of this? It's costing them money for you to not use their product, and they don't like that. But when you keep your utilization under 30 or 10%, it shows you do have a use for that product. Um, and it also shows them that in using the card, you're using it responsibly. So that shows that, yes, you do have a use for whatever product they've given you, but you're not using it to live. You're not using it to float yourself from month to month. You're not using it to pay your credit or your car payment, your car insurance, your all your monthly expenses, and you're barely, keeping $10 open on the card because you're using it so much every month. Um, and then as far as what it shows the credit bureaus, again, it shows them that you are financially responsible and you're in a good financial position to not over leverage yourself. You're not going to put yourself in a bad position by spending frivolously on all kinds of stuff, and just racking up debt month after month after month. Now, you do want to aim for that less than 30%. But if you can get it under 10%, that is the perfect sweet spot. Because again, as the chart shows, that puts you in the same category as people with perfect credit. And if you keep your utilization under 30%, this is where the benefit comes in. Your credit score will increase. If you keep your credit utilization under 10%, your credit score will increase even more quickly because again, it shows you're using these products in a perfect way that benefits both the card grantor or the credit card company, and it benefits yourself. And you're doing that consistently month after month after month. Um, that is a way to look at debt positively, and that's a way that you show both the credit card company and the credit bureau that you are responsibly using debt and you're using it as intended. All right. Now, this one flows into that same subject, and this is the statement date versus the payment due date. Uh, for whatever reason, there is not much talked about with these two dates, and they are critical in maintaining a good credit score while still being able to use whatever credit cards or credit lines that you have. So, how does that work? The two dates, right? We have the statement date, which most people only focus on the payment due date because that's the date that I know I have to take $100 out of my account and give it to the credit card company. So I keep that in mind. Most people never pay attention, think about, or most don't even know what the statement date is. Now, the statement date is, and you'll see it on all your statements, it'll show on there. That is when whatever balance that you've accrued on that credit card as of that date, that's what they report to the credit bureaus. Okay, so when let's say your statement date is, I don't know, the 20th, all right? Whatever your balance is on the 20th of that month, that's the amount that gets reported to the credit bureau. Um, you can spend another $1,000 between the statement date and the payment due date, but your statement will still only show whatever it showed on the 20th when they reported that to the bureaus. Now, this part, I don't want to say it gets tricky, but it's a part that you kind of have to put some thought into and a little bit of effort into, to make sure you're utilizing it properly. So we just talked about credit utilization, right? Now, in this portion of the conversation, the statement date versus the payment due date, you can carry a balance. Let's say you used 60% of your credit card balance, um, but it was you let's there's a lot of people that use it for monthly stuff and they just pay it off as they go, so they're using it just to get the rewards, which is a good strategy. So let's say you had $500 that you charged, and just keep it a relatively easy number. So that $500, you're going to pay and you have $1,000 limit. Let me set that parameter as well. So again, you have $1,000 credit card. You've spent $500, which puts your utilization at what? Can anyone give me what your utilization percentage would be at if you have $1,000 card and you've spent $500? Can anybody give me a guess on what that would put your number at? Don't be shy. Give you guys a couple seconds. So that will put your utilization at 50% because again, your credit line is $1,000 and you've spent 500. So that's 50% of your credit line, um, which is above what we said we are trying to aim for, which is keeping it under 30%, right? So what you can do is if you are treating your credit card like a debit card with rewards, meaning you spent that $500 and you have that 500 in the bank, you can pay it down by 250 bucks. So if you, let's say on the 19th, again, before the statement date, this is the critical part. I want to drill that in. Before the statement date, which means before the date that they report to the bureaus, okay? You'll pay that down, that $500 balance, you'll pay it down by 250, leaving you a balance of 250, which will put you at 25% credit utilization, right? Now, at 25% utilization, you're in a great spot in the eyes of the credit bureaus and the credit card company. Now, your payment, whatever they're calculating your payment at, your payment will be based off your balance of 250. So although you paid it down by that 250, leaving that same balance, whatever your payment is for that, it'll probably be about 40 or 50 bucks. Let's just say 50 bucks. Um, when you get your statement for the payment, it'll say you owe $50 for that month on a balance of 250. So that accomplishes two things. One, you're using the card, which is good. You want that history, you want the usage. Two, you kept it under 30%. And that's what the credit bureaus saw. That's the important part. They don't care that you use it throughout the month. They just want to know on the statement date every month, what is this person doing? And so you keeping it at 25% utilization, you are golden in their books. That's good. Your credit will increase. And then lastly, your credit utilization will go down slightly more once you make your monthly payment. Because let's say out of that 50 bucks, probably about 30, 35 will go to your principal amount, and that'll drop your balance by whatever that amount would be, 30, 35 bucks. So again, you're accomplishing multiple positive things in the same month by using the card, staying under 30% utilization, and making your payment on time. So that's three different pieces of criteria that you are crossing off the list in one single month. The more you do that, the more quickly your account or your, excuse me, not your account, your credit score will increase. So that's a really, really important concept. Um, that is kind of like stages one and two of that. There is a little bit more advanced way to do that, but I don't want to cover too much because we have some stuff that we're saving for the second class when we get into some more of the intermediate and advanced topics. But let me pause here for a minute or two. I want to be cognizant of the time as well. So let me stop here and see if anybody has questions. And then Ms. Fortney, I saw that you said, what's a good credit card to apply for if you're someone who's just starting credit? Probably one of the easiest and most consistent is Capital One. They have a lot of products depending on what stage of life somebody is in. So if it's somebody younger, and let's say they're in college, they have college cards. They have travel cards. Of course, they have all the super elite products for people that spend tens of thousands of dollars a month. Um, and then they also have what are called secured credit cards. So let's say somebody's 45 years old and they've never had a credit card. Um, they're not going to get approved, most likely, for a regular credit card. So they may have to get a secured card, which that product, if you've never heard of that, it genuinely is just a debit card with rewards because you have to load the credit card with whatever amount you want to use. So the credit card comes with $0. And if you want to spend $250 that month, you have to load $250 onto the card and then use your own $250. Um, but they do that as a method to capture people's payment history and spending habits before they give you their own credit products. Um, so hopefully that answers your question. All right, so let's move on. I don't want to keep you all past the time, so I'm trying to be cognizant of that as well. This one is a really, 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 I cannot emphasize it enough, really important concept. If you have kids, if you don't have kids and you know people have kids, please pay attention to this. It is extremely easy and makes a massive, massive difference. So, how do you build credit for your kids? Everybody thinks that you can't get credit until you're 18. Wrong. You can start building credit the moment you're born. Now, if you see here, and I'll get into what all of this means. So you'll see a lot of these banks or credit card companies say no minimum age requirement. Those are the ones I'm going to focus on. So let's say Capital One, since I already talked about them. Capital One, let's say you have a Capital One credit card, and I'm going to use my little man, I'm going to use SJ, my little buddy, as an example. So let's say Felicia and Sam have a Capital One credit card. Obviously, SJ is not using a credit card at any time soon. But what you can do is you can add SJ onto your credit card as an authorized user. What does that do? Well, one, it will generate a credit card for whoever you're adding on. But luckily, you get the mail, and SJ doesn't know what that is. So you can just shred the credit card. What benefit does that have, though? Um, it will report to SJ's credit almost exactly like it does on you all's credit. Now, a massive benefit is that by the time he's 18, because he's about to be two, so by the time he's 18, he'll have 16 years of credit history. That's crazy, and that does wonders for your credit. So he just hits 18 and he already has 16 years of credit history. Now, the burden for the parents or for the adult, whoever has the child on the card, the burden is that you maintain that in a responsible way. So while it's not as critical while they're really, really young, but once they start getting into their mid teens, you need to honor those credit utilization rates. You need to honor, you always need to honor your payment dates to make sure you're not missing payments. But um, you don't really the credit utilization is not going to really affect the child until they're in their late teens, right when they get close to 18. So if in the meantime, if you're still kind of building your credit and maybe some of your cards have a high balance, while it's not perfect, SJ doesn't need credit right now, so it's not going to negatively impact him. The biggest thing that you want to establish for your child or niece, nephew, or whomever it may be is that credit history. That makes a massively positive impact on their credit score when they hit 18. I did it for my nephew, and when he hit 18, he had never spent a dime, never had his own card, but he already had a 724 credit score the second he turned 18 by doing absolutely nothing. And it showed again, it showed that credit history of like I forget how many years. I want to say 13, 14 years for him. So yeah, it makes a yeah, exactly, Sam. It makes a huge impact. I cannot stress this to people enough. The one thing that you must do though, whenever you're applying for your kid, it's not really an application because it's always granted, but whenever you're putting in for your kid to have to be an authorized user, you want to make sure you put in their social security number. A lot of times they'll make it optional, but by putting in their social when you're applying for them to be the authorized user, it it makes sure that it's reporting to their credit because of course there's thousands of people with the same name, so sometimes things don't get reported because of that. But when you put the social in, it ensures that they report. So that's something to keep in mind. So this isn't something that really benefits us as adults or parents, but I know everybody wants their kids to be in a better position than they were. um, That is always the goal, and this is an extremely easy way to do it. Um, I mean, if you have two or three credit cards, you can put your kid on all three of them, and it'll do the same thing. It'll boost up their scores by having the length of history, as well as multiple lines. So something to keep in mind. I would absolutely encourage everyone to do that if you have a child. You can do it like yes, I did with my nephew. You can do it the same with your niece or nephew, but it's an extremely easy way to put them in a much better position than probably all of us were when we turned 18. All right. So these next couple slides, I'm not going to go too in depth because these are subjects that we're going to be covering in our second class when we get into investing and what that is and how to do it. So I'm not going to go too crazy because I also want to leave a few more minutes at the end for some questions. So um, investing is extremely critical. I know, again, just a misperception or misconception about investing my parents had was that it was like gambling and it's super risky, so they never did it, which was really unfortunate because the earlier you start investing, the better position you are in. And so this is something that I'll just stress, just kind of real topically high level overview. Please start investing for your kids, even if you're only doing like 50 bucks a month, 100 bucks a month. It is so important because a couple of things that we'll talk about in the next class. One is called compounding. And what that essentially means is the longer you have money invested, the more money it makes you. So it's really similar to credit. The longer you have investments, the better it is. Um, I mean, you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars in your child's investment account by the time they're 18. If you start when they're 0, 1, 2 years old and you just invest consistently. Of course, the more you're able to invest, the better position it puts them in. But um, time in the market is really the most critical thing. So the longer you have that money invested, the better it is. And people are like, oh, what about a crash? What about a recession? It doesn't matter. Keep investing because if everything is low, if all the prices of whatever asset you're looking at is low, that's the best time to get in. And the market always goes back up. There's never been a point where the market didn't go back up. Even after the Great Depression, the country experienced one of the greatest infusions of wealth it's ever seen after one of the worst depressions it's ever seen. So a lot of people get scared because they don't really know what the market is going to do. No one can predict it perfectly, but the most important thing is that you get in there. Um, and so that's why I put on here the most important thing to do is to start, and you don't have to be a professional. And I would say, and this was a mistake I made when I first started working, I didn't understand the importance of investment. So I didn't have a 401k or any kind of retirement until like 5 years into working. And a buddy of mine started working at the same time. We had the same job, same pay. And after seeing his account after those 5 years, it made me sick. I hated my decision. So I would say, similarly to investing for your kids, if you are working, please be putting something aside in whatever product your job offers. A lot of times, what they offer is not extremely good, but it is something. And if you're not familiar enough with the concepts of investing to do it yourself, that is absolutely a great way to go. Um, and so this, how much time do we have? I think I'm going to hold on to this until our next class, um, because this is a really really good subject, and it'll probably take me 10 to 15 minutes to get through, and I don't want to rush this part. So this will be at the beginning of our next class. We'll do a quick recap of what we talked about today, and then we'll jump into dollar cost averaging and investing with ETFs. Um, so on there, I will take questions. If anybody has anything you'd like to ask, this would be a perfect time. I'd love to answer whatever you may have thought of during this last hour. So you can either unmute yourself, put it in the chat, whatever works. I don't have anybody muted. All right. Well, you all not having questions either means I confused you or I taught it so well that it answered all of your questions. And I'm going to go with option B. Um, so a quick summary or something to look forward to for our next class. So since we did get into the dollar cost averaging and ETFs, that's what we'll start the class with. And then we'll also talk about something I mentioned, compound interest and how that works so extremely positively in your benefit. It is a massive, massive, massive boost to your investment. We'll talk about some simple framework for building long-term wealth. We'll talk a little bit about debt consolidation because I got a few questions for that. So I didn't have that in my initial outline, but we'll touch on that at the beginning of the class as well. And then we'll talk about some common investing traps and how to avoid the hype-driven financial mistakes. And of course, hopefully you all will leave some really practical ways to use this knowledge in a way to benefit you and your families financially. Ms. Fortney, you asked, what about line scans, about credit cards? How can you tell what's real or not? Um, to be honest, they're getting better and better. I don't do anything over the phone because there's so many ways that they can mask where they're actually calling from and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the safest way to do it is if I want to apply for a credit card, I go directly to their website and apply for it there. So if I want Capital One, I go to CapitalOne.com. If I'm applying for a Wells Fargo card, WellsFargo.com. I don't really like to mess with mailers that I get. I don't really like to mess with phone calls just because there's not really a bulletproof way to make sure that it's not a scam. So for me, the best way to uh, make sure I'm in a good spot is just to go there myself and I initiate the interaction. You're very welcome. Yeah, Sam, come with questions. Just as a note, the next class might go like an hour and 15 minutes. So just kind of budget that in as we get closer. So the next class is in 2 weeks on if I can get the slide to go. So it's on August 16th, so 2 weeks from today, same exact time, 12 to 1 Pacific or 3 to 4 Eastern. Um, so if we can get everybody to come back, I think not just saying this because I'm the one teaching, but I think it'll be really, really beneficial. And my goal is to give you some actionable information that you can use practically in everyday life. So much, much appreciated. If you want, we are going to have similar events like this throughout this year. The announcements go up on our social media pages. So Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok is just Praise Covenant Church. So that's where we're going to be putting up any future announcements, and of course, I'll have our media folks put some reminders for the next class as well. Um, but I appreciate everybody taking the
Oh,
time
I
to
have a
sit with me
question.
today. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm 22, right? I
Yes, sir.
two 4 years ago I just started my credit card, but I've been kind of bad with financially because I'm
Okay.
still young, so I'm still learning. So
Yep.
my credit card, it was like 15, the amount they gave me, and I spent all of it. So I'm trying to pay all that back in certain amounts.
Yes.
So my payments is on 18th every month, but I'm trying to change it to like a different day so I could increase my credit score.
Okay.
Will I be able to do that?
Yeah, so most credit card companies do allow you to change your payment date.
Hmm.
But to be frank with you though, it's not going to have an impact on your score. The only now let me dial that back really quickly. The only way it would have a positive impact on your score is the reason you're changing it is to align with your payments from your when you get paid from your job. So
Yeah.
if that makes it a little bit easier and you're able to be more consistent, then that would be helpful. But the date itself won't have any impact on your score. Um,
Okay.
your good thing is you are only 22, so you, of course, I'm sure you wish you didn't make that decision running up your credit
Yeah.
card, but you already did. You're only 22 though, so you have plenty of time. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing you have on
So
your
my
side
my
now.
credit score is right now is at 553. I'm trying to boost it up.
Okay. But I
So,
bet you if you so if you go to annualcreditreport.com, again, that's
hmm
annualcreditreport.com, you get one free credit report a year. So I would recommend going to that, and it's like a government run website because they make sure that everybody has access to one per year. So you go in there, you'll put in your information, you'll request your credit report, and it gives you a full detailed report. So I bet you, if you, when you get that report, it's going to tell you your score is at five. I think you said 553 because
hmm
of the utilization, because your utilization is so high, which is good. If that's the only thing keeping your score down, that's a relative good problem to have because that means you just need to get that balance down. And every time you pay your balance down, your score goes up. So they're directly correlated. So that's a really, I would say, probably one of the best problems to have if credit wise, because it just means you making payments. There's not really a magic bullet for that though. It's really just allotting as much as you can every month to get that balance down and doing your
yeah,
best to not spend on that same card. Um, Now, what you can do, and this is not the best extreme best scenario, but what you could do is if you have a second credit card and there, maybe some things are tight right now and you have to use your credit card for monthly stuff, you can use your second card that has a lower percentage, utilization percentage, um, while still paying down the card with a higher percentage. Now, you have to be super careful about that because then you can end up just running both cards up and then you're kind of stuck in the same position.
hmm
Um, but really, like I said, there's not really a magic bullet super secret solution for you. It's just allotting as much as you can every month to pay down the balance. And every month you lower your balance, your credit score goes up. So you'll start seeing that every time you pay down your balance by a little bit, your score goes up a little bit.
yeah, because I get paid like on the 23rd, 22nd,
Yep.
but I have to wait after the pay due on the 18th to pay for the credit card.
Mm. Yeah, so that's the easy conversation though. So you can call your credit card company and say, "Hey, I get paid on the 23rd of every month. Can I push my payment date to the 23rd or the 24th?" And
hmm
most credit card companies let you make that change once every, I want to say 3 years. It could be 4 years. But you get to do it every so often. So that is an option. And again, it's a super easy conversation. It's not like you're asking for something crazy. They get those requests all the time. So it's a standard thing for them to do. So you don't have to worry about getting somebody that doesn't want to do some really complicated thing. It's a basic transaction for them. So I would definitely suggest calling them and seeing if they can do that for your next one. Usually what it'll do is it'll take two payment cycles. So it probably won't take effect for your next one, but the one following.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
good. Excellent question. Excellent question. Thank you. All right, everybody. I want to be respectful of your time. Again, much appreciated. I'm glad you all made it. Hopefully, I made a good impression and you got some good info this time, and I will see you again in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of the weekend, everybody.